Right, you already heard a lot about me, about half my life, so I'll skip to the beginning quite quickly. Little disclaimer, it's about probably, likely, potentially, there's some stuff that will touch on GDPR borderline stuff. All the data that you see that I used in the slides, by the way, public. So, but still, if you look back at it and want to try it home, little disclaimer. About me, I'm a Dutch guy. I have my own company called Maven, recruitment company. I am a sourcer at heart. I'm also one of the organizers of a very big recruiting group in the Netherlands, about 500 plus sourcers and recruiters. It's called Slackers and Hackers, recruitment slackers and hackers. Then also, I did some work for Facebook, hired their chief architects and their engineering leadership throughout Europe. I worked for Uber. I also did engineering leadership. Both were roles that hadn't really been done before, the architect stuff at Facebook and the leadership stuff at Uber, because prior to that, it was all managed out of the leadership themselves at Uber. So interesting learnings there. And when I don't do anything with sourcing and there's time left, I have a beautiful dog and a nice car, which I like to tune up highly. He knows that. What are we going to talk about today? State of bankruptcy. I'll explain in a bit. We're going to talk about sourcing delivery, because many of you probably are trying to get a lot of stuff done. And I heard earlier in the day people saying, it's so busy, I wish I had more time in my week. We all have been there, and I'm constantly there as well myself. We're going to talk a little bit about how automation can help you with that and automizing some of the manual work that probably can be done a little bit faster. It's all around doing more with less. I truly believe that. Like, I've been doing sourcing for quite a while. I see a lot of tools that come out. I see a lot of people speaking about tools. And over the years, if I really look at what are the tools that have the most impact to me, most of them are actually free. And if I really look at all the extension that I have and I keep switching them around, there's only a few that I actually really use on the constant. So probably you also see just very simple solutions out of me, nothing on big tooling. I have a few at the end that I think are new and quite exciting for everybody, just so you know. I'm going to talk about sprints and how to deliver on that, and like I said, some tools. What if you want to deliver as a sourcing team, right? I mean, I've been doing sourcing as an IC, as an individual contributor for a while, for a few years, and now I'm leading a team of sourcers that is globally distributed. So the basic paradigm is here, like you should remember, is what if we were all broke? What if the economy takes a downfall? What if all of a sudden recruitment doesn't have huge budgets anymore? Your client is asking you to do everything on half the money, and you still have an excessive amount of hires to make against a high hiring bar and diversity and inclusion and all those things. How do you get it done? That is where basically the boring stuff comes in, but I think the boring stuff is really working. Call them sprints. Probably this, and I've been at SourceCon as well in Amsterdam. I saw some people already talking about it as well. But honestly, guys, it is important. If you work through iterations, it's nothing more than a short time box period where you and a few people complete a set of work. You can do it weekly, you can do it bi-weekly. There's various different routes to take. My current team does a weekly sprint. I'll explain more later on how I run that. But at least you speak to each other every week. You talk about the learnings, the success, the failures. And also, because you're responsible for delivering the sourcing work for that week as a group, there's little room for ego, which is something that I really like. I think that part of good sourcing also means trying to not be the best at something and shout on a stage, hey, I'm so good at it. But like, if you have great people around you, learn from them. And if somebody is behind on delivery and you have time left, you help them out. You just don't work only your pipeline. Basically, this would apply. Just do your job. That would be great. The way I do these things, and there's a lot of info on this, but this is just like a basic example of how I run it. I build a little deck, and you could do this in many different forms and tools or whatever, but I just use this one for now, where I talk about priorities. So every week, the whole team meets up. I lead the stand-up, and I talk about what are the priorities. The Friday before we talk about this, I ask all the recruiters to deliver me the work for next week. What is super pressing in what region of the world? Why do you really need help of a sourcer? Because otherwise, sourcers are asked constantly, right? Can you help out? Can you help out? Because it's so great to get a source lead, because it's probably better, right? And you need to, if you're in a small team, you need to make sure that you don't overcommit to these things. So I take a batch of work every week. I put names in the teams towards it. I ask everybody who wants to work on something. What is the anticipated goal for that week? And when we meet up the week after, we talk about the results. We just fill them in and we go, did we hit or did we miss? Sounds super logic. It is super logic, but that is basically how you can basically break up a large number of like 92 hires into what if I need to deliver that week over week? And am I 1% more like done, ready, closer to goal than I was last week? That's really good to track. If you want another tool for it, Trello can do it. Throughout the week, you have a backlog. Product people will know that as well. As you build a product, there's features to build and there's a backlog. This tool will help you. You can share it in a group and figure out what do we need to do now, what do we need to do tomorrow, how far are we? You can do it through Asana, you can do it through Jira. For the more technical folks who deal with a developer organization, probably Jira would be great as well, especially if you also do some work with developers in your sourcing. Sometimes I do that. It's really not that complex, even though it might look like a bunch of work. But what does it really come down to? Eat, sleep, source, repeat. I really, truly believe that. It's like the good nature of repeating your work, doing a good thing constantly with a set amount of focus will get you results. If you keep switching every week and there's a new manager that asks for another set of recs to fill, you'll never get the results. So you need to keep in mind, what am I going to tackle this week, this month, and basically look back constantly at the results. So this is my Monday, where we meet up with the team. We talk about how last week was working. We divide the work, and we work the backlog. And that is basically also next to the backlog, this is just your running week. Everything happens. Sourcing sessions, you have 1 million screen calls to take, you have hiring managers to keep updated. And that's when you repeat it again. But it would be great if some of the work would be automated, because I am super lazy by default. And that's also probably why I went into sourcing in the first place. Kind of enjoy taking some of the manual labor away. So I was thinking, right, there must be sort of a idea around what is a human doing versus what is a machine doing. And if you think about sourcing, ergo the finding, a lot of the work that you do, a lot of the scraping, a very interesting session before, by the way, on the Facebook events and connecting it to LinkedIn, it is super time intensive. And I think many of you, including myself, sometimes think, that's a great idea, I'll go and do it. And I realize, as we're doing it, it actually takes a lot of time in the week. And all the other recs then have to wait. And that creates time constraints again. So how can you make sure you optimize what needs to be optimized, and you keep some time to screen people, to do sell calls with your business on candidates that you really want to get in? That's also work of a sourcer. So what we're going to talk about is a bit around what if you scrape something in bulk. Let's say 100 plus rows for starters. You can do that free on Data Miner, just fine. Let's say you focus on a specific country because you have your event strategy from the last speaker. You have just general LinkedIn that you can source out of LinkedIn, but you can use Google for it and just use site double dot. And you're going to look at some people that you think might be great, but you don't want to go manually through all the profiles, because LinkedIn is a slow tool. It takes forever to render the page. I'm not a fan. Not a fan, I'm still using it, of course. So why automation? Let's say your team is small. Maybe you don't really have the brand like a Facebook, which means you also have a ton of people applying to your role, which creates its own struggle. You still need to do a lot of work. You have very high hiring targets, and sourcing is very repetitive. So it would be great to just take some stuff off your plate and focus on other stuff. Get coffee, talk to a colleague, screen a candidate. Basically, this could be me, although you see, because it has no tattoos. So what you could do, and I linked a video for people if you want to look back at the slides later and just figure it out yourself. Go to Excel and find a way to look at a rule system where you can just go, I went to Sourcing Summit. As you can see under number 2 in bottom with the beautiful pink lettering, it looks for the word Sourcing Summit. If the word exists, it will turn green. If under number 2, it says search for Stanford or deep learning, but the sentence doesn't say that. I have a PhD, so we'll do nothing. And under 4, you can go look for a word, and if the word exists, give a negative. Maybe you want to do an exclusion, a minus something on hundreds of rows in Excel. What you can do is use Data Miner and actually scrape the list first. And I've talked about this in my last presentation in Sourcing Summit Amsterdam last year. If you want more info, hit me up and I'll help you out. But if you completed that, and I presume that many of you already know how to do that, then it would be great to just list all of these words that you think are relevant. And in the top of these columns, you can see what I think is relevant. And I just build rules for all of these words. So what then I do is I go by country, I upload all of these lists, and I apply these rules constantly. I just copy paste them in, and I just take a little look and go, who has either 6, 7, or 8 bars in green? As you can see, no one here, but there are some searches that do. And remember, you're just writing a Boolean anyhow, or a query, so you sort of know what you're looking for anyhow. But you want to not look at everybody in LinkedIn. You want to take a step back and go, I'm only going to look at people that at least are 70% match. That's where the human eye comes in. The rest, I just throw out, because probably there's not enough of a link. What I also think is important on this is always measuring the impact. I mean, you can do a lot of things in sourcing, but if you really don't do your backtracking on the results, it may seem like you're doing a ton of work, but does that really reach your result? I firmly am a believer of the 5-3-1 rule, and at Facebook we were very much as well. All the recruiters I work with as well. X amount of interviews, X amount of offers, X amount of hires. Any data that comes before that, and for some of you who were at SourceCon in Amsterdam a few weeks ago, ThoughtWorks had a great talk about they had to hire 30 people in 3 weeks in Texas. And how they did that. And they backtracked all of the data. That data is super interesting, because if you're going to do sprints for a year long, and you're going to work on 20 engineers now and 20 engineers in the next 6 months, you want to use that data from the sprint and go, how effective was I? How long did it take? Can I do it faster? Or you can say to your hiring manager, we can sort of estimate that we will take 14 weeks to hire 15 engineers. And that's just really insightful insight before you start working on it, and before the hiring managers get impatient and you get into these really nasty discussions that start out really great at week 1, and at week 15 they're like, where are my hires? Why? Like, what's wrong with you guys? You want to avoid that. Also, what you must not forget is sourcing is quite an expensive way of lead generation. Many companies get applicants, and some of these applicants are really good, but the value of your work, the amount of time equals money, equals, exposure, brand marketing that you put into that single lead, it represents quite a bit. So it's super important that these metrics around sourcing every week, what's the result, what's the conversion, get noted and get tracked. And if you're going to lead a team, that's going to be something that you probably want to look at. I do that as well. So the kind of conversation that I have with my sourcers or recruiters who also source, which I'm a big fan of, is actuals and totals. What happened this week, Pink? What happened in total? And then use that week over week, month over month. I'm not going to ask you for how bad your week is or the specific cases or why this week wasn't as productive as last week. I trust you that you know what you're doing. Probably had a very good reason for not being as productive. It's not all about the numbers, but it's all about keeping a trend on conversion. Is this week really good because of you source a different way? Or do you just think this week was really good, but if you look at the numbers and compare it to last month, it wasn't really that good? So that's the kind of reporting that I do with my sources. Really easy and doesn't take a lot of time at all. I firmly believe that this is really a thing. There was a sales manager in a startup I used to work once, and this is what he would say to salespeople. Without focus, no success. I do really believe it. If you work 1,000,000 recs, and if you have to source for all of them, you're not going to really be successful. And that's why I say sourcing time is valuable, a source lead is valuable. Figure out where you're going to source. And be brave enough to say to a hiring manager that really wants you to source somewhere, it's not going to happen. We have a better source of where candidates can come from. Maybe some automation stuff, or at least some interesting things that I saw on the internet, and probably I'm looking at front left. Maybe he saw this as well. He didn't, or he did? Yeah. Okay. Well, it's kind of nice of an extension, and Andre Bradshaw made it, and that guy is absolutely doing amazing things. So follow him if you aren't already. It's called Quickly, and it's a Chrome extension, and you can really you could use it to find similar profiles, but all out of your main LinkedIn screen. So if I'm looking at, for instance, a data scientist, and I finally find a company that I can engage with, that we did all the background checks on, that somebody is really good from, it probably means that there's multiple of them. Normally you need to click, like, what does the company do? That's another click, or even 2 clicks. Where are the other people? You need to click the company that the first LinkedIn profile says he's working at. You need to look at, it takes so much time. This thing all automizes it. It's literally 1 click. You can save things to PDF. You can send an invite out of this this beautiful little box that appears in your screen. It makes your life pretty fast if you do lots of repetitive work lots of the time. And then what I find interesting next is, if you're in a LinkedIn project like this, you can export it with this tool immediately, which is kind of interesting, because then sort of this happens. And a little hint on where I was looking at. If you look at the kind of data it gets, and I heard Marcel say that there's even another script that he is working on that is even next level to this one, so can't wait, Marcel. But if you look at the kind of data that they're pulling from it, months in a job, pretty interesting. If you really did some metrics on how long do certain people in certain companies stay in their job, previous employers, previous titles, graduation dates. That's data that I would take an interest in, especially when I'm focusing, again, once you're sourcing, you're focusing on one area or a few areas, and you do that for a set amount of weeks or months. So I really want to get to know the target group. That also means, in a certain country, for how long is the average stay in a job? I do that at city level as well, to make sure I know, are people in Montreal leaving their job quicker, or in Toronto? Like, those are kind of metrics that I sometimes take an interest in. Yeah, so that's a great tool that you can use. Then also, a very lazy one, but a great one, is CV timeline. Again, a Chrome extension, and it populates literally a timeline above the profile. So you can see exactly what I've been doing. Really, again, you don't need to scroll. You don't need to, if you quickly just want to know something about a profile, in the immediate moment you click it, this is what you'll get. And sometimes, obviously, you see that if this isn't the right year here, you already know that you can skip it. If that was still internship and you needed somebody with more years of experience, you can go. Then, simple stuff, but I think it's super important. Again, we were talking about a situation when there's no money, right? So setting up screen calls, automate what you can do. I hear so many people going, yeah, and I need to set up a conversation, XYZ. Just use Calendly, automate it. I put my slots in my calendar. I say exactly when I can talk. People will find it out themselves, especially because the backlog of candidates I need to screen is getting very large at this point. I can't manage their agendas. I don't want to manage their agendas. I don't want to respect them enough to go, you decide when you can speak with me. I decide that I don't want to speak with you at 1 a.m. in the morning, but otherwise we can meet up. You figure out when. And I just get a nice email up. It's probably 7 p.m. Fine. Of course, this is repetitive stuff, but I think it's still important. Why not automate some of your follow-ups? There's a slight notification to GDPR in this. My best advice is, Lemlist is a great optimizer for when you're on a Google Suite. You can schedule messages, you can alter them, you can add all kinds of things. Lemlist will do roughly the same for you when you're in Outlook. Those are great ways, because remember, once you do sprints and you've identified the people and you want to reach out, I don't want to do manual follow-ups on 140 people in a week. That's horrible. And then the final reminders, and like, no, I don't do that. So this can be optimized. My best advice, keep it all under 30 days. Because GDPR basically says that, right? If the data is stored and if you want to reach out, like after a 30-day period, things change. So what I even do is I just refresh my outbox and I just throw everything out. So I know that there's no data of anyone anywhere after 30 days. So you just keep it in a nice time frame. Last one that I also really use a lot is Text Expander. I'm unsure if you like to type stuff, and especially if you're in an agency or have multiple clients that have multiple ways of interviewing and prep calls and all those things, but this list holds about 100 things in my book. I can send whatever. This is an example of, by the way, lead engineering screening calls. You could do this. Could be a good one to take a little look at. But I do this especially for specific prep calls. When a candidate has to do a certain architectural interview, I know what the rough topic will be. It is a huge amount of information. Just populate it. Get hotkeys. This is my double dot text screen. It populates, send it out, and you're gone. Again, much faster than writing every single email manually. So, and I really realized that I was a little bit ahead of time, so that's actually not that bad of a deal. What have you learned? How to get shit done, really. If you don't have a bunch of money, but you do have some targets, balance out the interaction between where you as a human do work versus where you automate stuff. Ask yourself always the question, in your sourcing team, who do I need to help in order to have success? It might be that you're ahead of the game and that you're really doing well, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your team isn't struggling. And I always really enjoy the people that go, no ego here, we're both responsible for the end goal. We know on Monday when the sprint's there, we have a goal to meet, and if it's not me, it's you. And I want to take sourcing a little bit away from the siloed environment in which some of the bigger companies have. You have your role, you fix those recs by X date, and you live your world. But what happens if you're sick? What happens if some of your colleagues just have 5 declines on offers? They need help, right? So help them out. And honestly, if you look at all of this, I've used all 3 tools, I think. It's quite simple. I mean, I'm unsure how many extra times I can speak about topics, maybe some very specialized stuff on how to scrape XYZ, but like, this is really the sourcing funnel and how you could run it. And if you know that you do stuff in a certain week and you have 3 priorities, you work the backlog like all of the product engineering companies and all product managers in the world, by the way, do for years and years and years, you should reach your goal. So it isn't that hard, and I hope that it's accessible. So any questions?
Yes. First of all, thank you. Super interesting.
Cool.
Why aren't you using chatbots yet?
Because funny enough, when I was at Facebook, I knew somebody that was working on it. The reason why personally I'm not doing it is because there's a love for, you source so heavily to get a certain amount of profiles that you interact with. By the time I've done all my research, whether that's human or machine, I want to spend every time that I have on engaging with them personally. It also depends on the kind of recs that you have. At Facebook, with I don't know how many people applying, it works to give some general information to a large group of people that you haven't screened yet, you don't know anything, but they want to know more. That's very unscalable as a very small group of sources that I'm a part of. So if I'm honest, every week I spend about, even though I'm a lead, I spend 10 to 15 hours doing research on people and writing messages. And it takes a long time. And every Monday of the week, I go, fuck my life, I have to do this again. Every week. And for the last 7 years, it's been like that every week. And still I know part of the reason why conversion is high is because I take the time to do it. People do really feel that. So if I've done all the work to figure out who's good, I'm going to spend every sweat, blood, everything to make sure that they respond.
What about playing with it to understand if what you're feeling is correct?
Yeah, that's a very good idea. I mean, you could obviously do it. I wouldn't say that for every role you can give information or you can slightly introduce them better into a role without human interaction necessarily. I also feel that, I'm not unsure about you guys, but I feel chatbots, like I feel them once it's happening. Oh yeah, there's this chatbot. So I always ask, hey chatbot, how are you? Like give me and I ask them a sum or something, and then usually it breaks, and then I just know, there you go. I just want to stay away from that. That's a bad chatbot. Yes, I definitely agree. But I like the human interaction. As I'm really a sourcer, I'm only focusing on a few people for a role. I really want to take the time for those people.